Welcome back to Dumbest in the Room. Today I'm joined by one of the hardest working guys in show business. Brian Parsons has worked for the WAVY-TV 10 Sportswrap and FOX43 Sportswrap for over 20 years. Brian is a local legend. Brian, thank you for being here.
Steven, pleasure to be on.
So, as I mentioned, you've worked on the Sportswrap. Talk to me about how you got there. Talk to me about young Brian. Did you play sports? Did you always know you wanted to work in TV?
I mean, I played sports as a kid, like in the neighborhood, basketball and football and things like that, just like with the neighborhood kids. But actually, I always knew I wanted to be in media at a really young age. My brother, my oldest brother who lives in Hawaii now, was very influential in radio in Hampton Roads. And I kind of got the bug at an early age, going out with him on certain things, on remotes and going to the station. And he actually worked in New York City in radio up there. So I would go visit him as a kid. And, I just caught the bug early on. So I knew my mission was to be in actually radio is what I wanted to do. And I went to Old Dominion and I majored in communications and I interned at Channel 3 because there was a guy named John Castleberry that worked there that also had a radio show on the sports radio station in Hampton Roads. Back then it was ESPN Radio 1310. And my goal was, all right, I can intern here, get a little TV experience, because I didn't know anything about radio internships. And if I make a good impression on John Castleberry, then maybe I'll get like a part-time job at the radio station. That was kind of the goal. And as it turned out, the internship ended at the Channel 3 had gotten bought by the New York Times. There was all this turmoil at the station, turnover and weird stuff going on. And the sports department kind of got shifted around and they needed a body to go out and shoot games. And so they would give me $20 to go shoot a Tides game, to go shoot a ODU basketball game, to go shoot a high school football game. And obviously that's not enough to live on. I was still in college at the time. I was also working at the Marriott in downtown Norfolk, parking cars as a valet. So I did that for Channel 3, just kind of, the foot in the door, being out in the field, shooting games, gathering material, learning the ropes, not knowing anything that I was doing. I mean, it was total trial by fire, thrown into the wolves. And I kind of got a good grip on it. And then an opportunity opened up at WAVY in 1997, June of 1997. A guy by the name of Mike Martini had kind of recruited me over there. And it was a part-time job at first. I was the teleprompter operator for the 11 o'clock news. And I also, the shift was basically supposed to be like 7 to 11. So I would go out and shoot stuff for sports and help out, and then run prompter for the 11. But the 4-hour shift was never a 4-hour shift. Bruce Rader would work me and, find more extra hours and more things for me to shoot. But that was a godsend, actually. And after a year, Mike Martini left to go for a job in Raleigh, North Carolina at WRAL. And then I got promoted to his position as a sports producer. And that was in 98. And that's kind of evolved. That job's kind of evolved. 98 things were different, man. There's no internet, at least not in the form that we know it now. We're still dealing with fax machines and all the videotape. We're editing tape to tape, and just to see the industry change from then to now. But that's kind of how I got to where I am now. I mean, I've been at WAVY ever since. I've loved it. I can't see myself anywhere else.
Talk more about the changes that you've seen from then to now. I mean, you mentioned shooting on tape and editing on tape. I mean, even as far back as when you were a kid and you knew you wanted to work in radio, how has sports journalism changed from then to now?
Oh, geez. It's like, anybody with a cell phone is a journalist now. You go to these high school football games and everybody thinks they're in the media. I mean, I guess technically you are, but it's just more of these people out there, gathering all of this stuff. But the biggest changes, I mean, when we want highlights from something, it's basically a click of a button. If we want, say, ODU plays VCU in Richmond, and we want highlights of that game, and we're not able to go to Richmond, and it's not on television, we could email the affiliate in Richmond and say, hey, look, can I get the highlights of the ODU game, ODU VCU game? Yeah, no problem. We'll basically email it to you, essentially, through WeTransfer or something like that. It wasn't like that back then. Back then, if you wanted the highlights, it was like, oh, God, really? Okay, well, book a satellite window at 10 o'clock. All right, let me book a satellite window. So you have to call Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where the satellite center was, 704-329-8765. I still know the phone number. Call them up. Hey, Jamie, this is Brian at WAVY. I need a 10 o'clock satellite window from WWBT in Richmond. We don't have 10 o'clock. We have 10:05. Okay, fine, 10:05. What is it? Satellite coordinates, AMC 123A. Thanks, Jamie. Call Richmond back. Hey, Richmond, it's not going to be at 10 o'clock. It's at 10:05. AMC 23A. Okay, hey, here's the feed point number. At 10:05, call this number. So at 10:05, you'd have to call back to make sure they roll the tape, and then you're rolling on the other and recording what they're sending you. It was a whole process for a 30-second highlight reel.
Jeez.
And now it's a click of a button. It's crazy. These kids, you don't know how much you haven't made now.
Yeah, I can't even imagine having to do that. Wow.
It's a lot of work, a lot of processes, just for the simple things like that. News gathering has changed dramatically. You're familiar with the live packs, obviously. Mm-hmm. Tell people what a live pack is.
Live pack, from my understanding, is basically just like kind of like a cell phone. It requires cell service, right? And then it connects to cell service, and they can dial in on an IFB line. And
like live shots. Live shots are done via basically a backpack that you just plug the camera into. We still have microwave trucks, but microwave trucks, everything was a microwave truck. Pulling cable 100 feet, connecting to a truck, and just raising a mast 25 feet into the air to get the signal so it can bounce off one of our towers to get back to the station. You know, the live pack technology for news gathering has been an absolute game changer, and the technology only gets better. I predict that the backpack eventually one day is going to be gone, and it's going to be the live pack is just going to be basically built into the camera eventually, right? I mean, those things keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't see why not.
Yeah, hey, you might want to put a patent on it or something, frick.
I'm sure somebody else beat me to it.
Talk more about, and I want to hear some of your stories of the trial by fire, because, you know, sometimes, as I've learned with this podcast, like my camera that I shoot myself on, I thought was charging all night long. It wasn't. So now I'm just going off the Zoom video here. But I mean, I'm sure you've had plenty of moments like that where maybe you messed up something that only happened once.
I can remember vividly once it was covering a high school football game in Todd Stadium in Newport News. That's out by Christopher Newport. Our station's in Portsmouth. 40 minutes, 45 minutes on a good day. Going out to shoot Hampton High School, the Crabbers. And they had a player by the name of Ronald Curry on that team who was the best high school football player I've ever seen. He was absolutely incredible. He also played basketball. He was the National Player of the Year in basketball and football. Committed to UVA, ended up going to North Carolina, and he was the point guard for the basketball team, starting point guard and the quarterback for the Tar Heels. Amazing player, had some injuries, ended up being a receiver in the NFL, and now he's a quarterback coach for the Saints. So he's still in the game. So anyway, got to get those Ronald Curry highlights. We used to fight over who was going to shoot his games because his highlights were amazing. Drive out to Todd Stadium, grab a camera off the shelf. There was this one photographer that had a camera that used different batteries than everybody else. And that's whose camera I grabbed. I got there and the battery, it didn't connect. It wasn't the right one. And I'm at this game and this is this big star on the field playing. I mean, I've got to go back. I got there right at kickoff. So let's say kickoff it was a Saturday afternoon. I remember that. So kickoff's at 1 o'clock. I'm like, okay, drive back to Portsmouth. That 45-minute drive back to Portsmouth might have been like 30 minutes to catch my drift. And then grabbed the right batteries, drove back, got there in probably the end of the third quarter. Ronald Curry saved my butt because he ended up giving me like 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I mean, I missed his other 7 touchdowns that he probably had, but that was one where, you know, hey, double check and triple check your gear before you go out, because if you have the wrong stuff and you're 45 minutes away, there's probably nothing you're going to be able to do about it, and you're going to have some explaining to do.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, I mean, good thing you threw those other 4 touchdowns for you.
I got something. Yeah, you don't need to see those other ones. You don't need to see the 99-yard touchdown run. You don't need to see that. How about this 1-yard touchdown run? Much better.
Okay, so you mentioned Ronald Curry is obviously one of many names that you have seen kind of from the junior level all the way to the top of the leagues. So who are some of the people that you have shot and then have gone on to do bigger things?
The interesting thing about Ronald Curry, he was at Hampton but Hampton was winning state championships left and right. His junior year, I think they outscored their opponents. It was like 865 to like 75.
What?
It was unreal. I mean, this was the greatest team I've ever seen. In the same district in Newport News at Warwick High School, there was a quarterback by the name of Michael Vick. That his team, he didn't have the players that Ronald Curry had, so they weren't making the playoffs. Everybody knew Michael Vick was good. He just wasn't getting the publicity that Ronald Curry got. There'd be times we wouldn't even shoot his games if there wasn't something nearby to shoot with it. So Michael Vick definitely won. Another was Percy Harvin at Lansdowne High School in Virginia Beach. He played football and basketball and ran track, but football was, he was a maestro on the field. He was amazing. And that was another one where people, like, when they would get their assignments, everybody wanted to get the Percy Harvin game because they knew they were going to get the goods. And he ended up going to the University of Florida and then into the NFL, and he won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. And he was an all-pro player, but kind of injuries kind of did him in. You got guys like Plexico Burris, who caught the game-winning catch in the Super Bowl for the Giants. D'Angelo Hall, who went to Deep Creek High School, Virginia Tech, had a great career with the Washington football team and the Atlanta Falcons. It's just countless guys. It's really and then you go to baseball, you've got the guys like B.J. Upton and Justin Upton and Ryan Zimmerman and David Wright. And the funny thing is, a lot of these guys, they're not like just mid-tier average guys. We're talking the cream of the crop, like top 5 draft pick stars, really, that have come out of here. It's really wild. So there's been a lot of great players, and there's a whole new crop of these new guys coming through, and it's kind of hard to keep up. It's just so many of us. Some of the legends. Percy Harvin and Ronald Curry were two of the best I've ever seen on the field. And with Percy, it definitely translated into the NFL with his Super Bowl win.
You mentioned Michael Vick. He didn't have the best team, but everybody knew he was good. So how do you kind of like isolate, how do you, I don't know how to ask this. How do you know like somebody's going to be great, even if their circumstances aren't? And how do you like to cover them? And you know what I mean?
But you kind of, in a situation like that, the word was out. People were recruiting Michael Vick. Like Syracuse was recruiting Michael Vick. Virginia Tech was recruiting Michael Vick. So you see that and you're like, okay, this guy is pretty good. And then you watch him and you're like, yeah, he's got a cannon of an arm, but you really don't know how good he's going to be until you see him around other elite athletes, which he really didn't necessarily have at Warwick High School. And the momentum of him going to Virginia Tech, it was the publicity of that. The Hokie Nation just was hog wild over this guy. They knew, everybody kind of sensed he was going to be good, not as good as he was, but in a situation like that, if you know that the team may not necessarily be good, but if you're going to do highlights of the game, then he's going to kind of be the central focus of it. Hey, remember this guy's name, Michael Vick. He's committed to Virginia Tech. He's from here. He could be something. Keep an eye on this guy. So you just kind of focus on the player. The star player that, we think is going to have the potential to do something. They don't all pan out, though, as you can imagine. Yeah.
And that's crazy. You rattled off some serious names.
Yeah, these guys are no joke. In all different sports, too, basketball, football, baseball. I'm waiting for the day when we have a hockey player drafted, but I don't know. That may not happen around here, but you never know.
Our colleague Kyle, maybe his son.
Carson Bloom, maybe Carson will be the first draft pick from Hampton Roads and I.
Could be.
He's big enough. I think he's big enough to play right now.
Yeah, he's huge. What is your favorite sport to cover? Because I know that Wavy has Friday Night Flights, which is the local football show, which I want to talk more about. But before that, what is your favorite sport to cover?
My favorite sports to cover probably college basketball and college football. I love covering Old Dominion football and all the other local, the Norfolk State, Hampton, William & Mary, UVA, Virginia Tech. But I went to Old Dominion. I've always loved college basketball. And when I grew up in my house, the two big sports that were always on were ACC basketball. And back then it was Ralph Sampson and UVA and Michael Jordan and UNC and James Worthy and all these guys. And Lefty Drizel from Norfolk was coaching Maryland. He is a character. But college basketball is probably number one. And then number two would be Old Dominion football. I mean, mainly because when I went to Old Dominion, football was a pipe dream. There was no chance they were going to get football. They had a stadium. They just didn't have a team. And then they finally got the team. They played their first they awarded the team in 2007 and played in 2009. And then, I mean, it was a dream come true to walk into that stadium and see 20,000 people, and the tailgating was amazing. I never thought I'd see it, and I don't take it for granted. I mean, every time I go to an Old Dominion football game, I have to pinch myself. And, they built a new stadium, and it's even better. And they moved up to another division, and they beat Virginia Tech a few years ago. Back when we did the show with Bobby Wilder, you saw him every week. You know my passion for ODU football. You can tell that. You knew that.
Yeah, for sure. And my great-granddad was actually on the very first ODU football team back in like the 40s.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they had a team for like 10 years and they disbanded it. Yeah.
So we'll piggyback off of that. I do want to talk about Friday night flights, but I'm not a huge sports guy. When I started at Wavy, I honestly didn't even like football. But then when because of you, met like Bobby Wilder and the players that would come in and do the ODU football show, that kind of humanized it for me. I always thought of these guys like kind of jerks, but unfounded. You know what I mean? That show was a good show, and you guys put a lot of work into it.
And I think the thing too, like, talk about like these players, it's like they're bigger than life. They're larger than life. And then, you meet them and then you realize, wait a minute. Just because he may be 6'5", 275 pounds, but he's still a 19-year-old kid per se, So I think that's one thing that you kind of have to remember when you talk to these guys. They're growing up just like all of us,
Yep, and that show made a football fan out of me for sure, and the Washington Huddle.
Oh yep. Oh boy, that team. I'm a Washington football team fan, or Commanders, right? I'm a Commanders fan, and what do you think of the name?
The name I don't think really affects the playing, so it doesn't bother me.
I don't. Yeah, my thing is, everybody that wants to hate on it and they complain about it, it's like, okay, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but don't you have other things to get mad about? It is just a name. Do you like the team or not? If you don't like the name, go root for the Cowboys. Then they got room for you. You're going to get used to it. We're going to get used to the name.
Jerry Seinfeld's bit about you're just rooting for laundry because the players keep changing.
I've always said the fans are the only ones that are loyal. The owner will, if he doesn't get a deal, he'll move the team to another city. The players, they'll leave your team in a second to get a better deal down the street for another team. So, yeah, you are rooting for laundry. But that's pretty cool laundry. Those uniforms are pretty cool for the Commanders.
100%. All right, let's talk Friday night flights. When did that start, and kind of how did it conceptualize? Because it's a huge deal in Hampton Roads.
Well, we'd always done a high school football show. It used to be called the it was the High School Sports Spectacular. And Wavy'd always had a chopper around, but they used to rent the chopper. In 2000, we actually bought our own helicopter, parked it in the garage, like on campus, so to speak. So when we bought the chopper, management, we had a news director that had done a show similar in another market, I believe in Wichita. His name was Jim Turpin. And he kind of devised this plan of this very elaborate plan. We kind of skewed from his plan because his plan initially included no interviews with players whatsoever. Forbidden. You can't do it. If I see a player being interviewed on that show, you're coming into the office. I don't know. I guess he felt like kids really didn't have much to say. I disagree with that. He doesn't work here anymore. He hasn't worked here for almost 20 years. But so we kind of devised the plan that it was initially going to be called Friday Football Flights, FFF. And it ended up being, we kind of massaged it into Friday Night Flights. And the initial plan was to take the chopper and pick 4 games and fly one of the anchors around, a different anchor each week. And they'd go to a school, they'd land in the school, they'd do a little bit on and bring it back on tape. So it's be 4 kind of bits. They throw out footballs. There's a lot of work coordinating that. I had to call all these schools and ask them if we could fly a helicopter and land it during a game next to their stadium, and a lot of the athletic directors were just like, man, I don't even want to deal with this, Mm-hmm. This is a pain. You're dealing with some schools, like they have to bring out the fire department just in case. And the schools further away from the core of Hampton Roads were the ones that were like, loved it. They would love the publicity. They would paint Chopper 10 in the end zone, and wow. They really welcomed us. And the format of the show has kind of changed. Liability things have kind of changed. We don't land the chopper at the schools anymore. We're not allowed to do that anymore. So now what we do is we have an HD camera in the chopper. So, we'll pick like 3 or 4 games, and we'll just kind of Chris Omahan, the photographer, and the chopper pilot will hover over a game and shoot some highlights in high definition, which is a vantage point you're not going to get anywhere else. So the show has kind of evolved from that, since we're not, for whatever reason, I don't know the logistics as to why we're not allowed to land anymore. We were able to land and get out, but, I guess liability, whatever, things have changed. I like the way it is now. I like the idea that we get more highlights in. I thought doing 4 of the anchor bits kind of took away from the kids and kind of put the focus more on, the anchor, which was part of the point of the show, to kind of promote the talent. But, it is a high school football show. And I think the people watching at home, they want to see their kids. They want to see the highlights of the kids. They want to see what's going on in the community, with the talent on the field. And I think, we do a good job of showcasing that. It's like election night every Friday night. We got crews out all over Hampton Roads, 12 to 13 games, and they've got to all drive it back, and we just kind of got to get it on the air, man. It's like fear's the biggest motivator, the fear of missing slot, get these highlights on, by hook or crook, we're getting these on, and we always get it on. Somehow we always get it on.
Dang right. It's always action-packed action, right?
Action-packed action. You know it.
So Friday Night Flights was obviously a great kind of jumping off point. Now, as we mentioned, you do the Washington Huddle, and we did do the ODU football show. Is that kind of something that the sports department is coming up with, and you as a producer, or is that something like the sales department's coming up with and says, hey, we need you to put together the show?
Well, ODU football, honestly, was Bruce Rader's idea when ODU got football. The second it was announced that they got football, he wanted to do that. So he knew Bruce is smart. 45 years, no dummy can hang around for 45 years. So he knew that the community was going to embrace Old Dominion football. The Washington Huddle was a Nexstar thing. We're owned by a company called Nexstar, 200 plus stations all across the country. And a lot of these Nexstar stations in different markets would do their version of the Washington Huddle in Pittsburgh and just different NFL cities. So that was kind of a Nexstar model that they gave to us. And I remember thinking, oh man, there's no way we're going to be able to pull off a 30-minute football show every week with everything else that we do. And then, of course, you get into it and you're like, 30 minutes isn't enough. We need more time. Come on, what are you crazy? 30 minutes? That's it? Come on. We need more. We need more time. So that show's been a blast. I just wish the team would be better. They've only made the playoffs, I guess, twice since we've done the show. I think we've done it 5-6 years now. And, we bring in former NFL players. Pre-COVID, we would bring in former NFL players to come in on the set and kind of analyze the game. And now we do, it's Bruce with Scott Jackson, who is the post-game radio host for the Washington Commanders. Remember, we got to get used to the name. We all will. And they would do that via Zoom. And it's a really fun show. It's my favorite football team. It's my childhood team. And to kind of be a part of a 30-minute show that is not only airs in Hampton Roads, it airs in Richmond, the Richmond affiliate of Nexstar, the Roanoke affiliate, the Hagerstown affiliate, and that Hagerstown affiliate were also in DC. So it's a syndicated show. So a lot of people get to see it. So that's pretty cool. I'm proud of what we do with that show.
Talk more about producing it. I don't know if things have changed since I did cameras on the studio cameras on it, but I remember there being like some stipulation that you could only use a certain, length of NFL footage. So how do you kind of take those parameters and
3 minutes
and fit it into a 30-minute show?
3 minutes of highlights. That's it. The NFL restricts it to 3 minutes of highlights, which is actually more than you think. It really is. Because I'm literally timing it with a stopwatch. I don't want to get busted. I'm not going to get busted because we're not going to go over 3 minutes. Maybe 3:01. That might have happened once. But you just kind of you supplement it with information, personality, and Getty images, pictures, still pictures. You can throw those in there, and we're not limited to how much sound bites we can use from the team. So you get to hear from the coach and the players. This past year has been a dream. Going back to the playoffs last year, Taylor Heineke was the quarterback at Old Dominion. And then he gets kind of thrust into the spotlight. And next thing you know, he's the starting quarterback for Washington, which that was a great, fun thing to cover. The guy that I covered every single home game that he ever did and a few road games for Old Dominion, undrafted, out of football. And then next thing you know, he's the starting quarterback for Washington, and he won 7 games. So Taylor Heineke, who was basically out of football, is basically, at the very least, has found himself a career as a backup in the NFL, which I don't know if you're aware of the pay for a backup quarterback in the NFL, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. You think he'll be back next year starting?
Yeah, well, I don't think he'll be back. He's under contract. He has one more year left on his contract, but I don't know that he's the answer for a full season to be the guy. Maybe he is. He had his chance this year. He was 7-8 as a starter. I think he is an awesome backup. He's about as good of a backup as you're going to get. They're going to look for another starting quarterback. They are. They're in the market for it. They basically admitted it. Everybody knows that. Yeah.
Well, that kind of
bums shame of being a backup.
Yeah, that kind of bums me out because like I said, I wasn't a huge football fan, but then having that local connection I tuned in for the whole season.
Yeah, but the starters go down a lot. They get hurt a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Heineke, the reason he started was because Ryan Fitzpatrick got hurt in the first game. Broke his hip apart. So that's the only reason he got to play was because the guy that they brought in to be the starter got hurt. Happens all the time.
Jeez. Talk about the importance of kind of keeping it local because we don't at Wavy. There's not a whole lot of. You guys do national coverage, but a lot of it is locally focused. Like with the World Series. We were talking a lot about Chris Taylor and the Dodgers. So talk about the importance of that.
Well, I think you don't want to. If you want to take the national angle, it's going to be pretty hard for us to compete with ESPN. And things like that. So we want to give the local viewers in the community basically something that they're not going to be able to get anywhere else. So we try to keep it hyper local. Obviously, there are things that transcend local sports. The Super Bowl. And even if the Super Bowl this year, not a lot of local flavor, if any, at all. But in years past, there's been local players in the Super Bowl. So that's kind of like, yeah, we'll give you the national spin, but we're going to focus on, hey, Cam Chancellor. From Maury High School, Virginia Tech, he could be a key component in the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl, which he was. Percy Harvin on that same team. So it's and the Chris Taylor, perfect example. And a couple of years before that, when the Nationals won the World Series, Ryan Zimmerman from Kellam High School, my alma mater, and Daniel Hudson, who went to Princess Anne High School, they were key parts of that team. So that's kind of like the focus we want to take. If we're going to, do a soundbite with somebody after the game, we're going to try to find something with one of the local. Well, Nathan Epstein actually went to the World Series. So when he goes into the locker room after the game, he's probably not going to go after Anthony Rendon. He's going to go after Ryan Zimmerman and Daniel Hudson to kind of get the local reaction. Because I think that's what the community wants to see. I think they want to hear from the guys that grew up with us and now have made it. And, it's always cool when they give a shout out to the area and, and they give, they pay homage to the 757.
You mentioned Nathan went to the World Series. Did the Chris Taylor thing or, Ryan Zimmerman, did that kind of have a role in getting the permission to go to that? Or is
with the Nationals, it was strictly, they're kind of like the local team almost. Right. The Nationals and the Orioles. Orioles also being the AAA affiliate of the Tides being the AAA affiliate of the Orioles. Orioles aren't going to the World Series anytime soon. But with the Nats, a lot of local Nats fans and 2 local players. So we just go to the news director and say, hey, look, we think this is something worthwhile to cover, and we can provide you a lot of good local content on the World Series that is on one of our stations, by the way, on Fox 43. So we got the green light to go.
Kind of makes
Nathan also got bad news up there in DC. He got something in the mail when he came back. So DC has speed cameras.
Oh no.
And he was saying, man, there was this one part of the interstate that the speed limit dropped to like 40 and everybody slowed down, but I guess he didn't. And it was a construction zone with no construction. So he got a ticket for $300 for speeding on a 40-mile-per-hour section of the interstate.
That would happen to him.
Welcome to DC.
Kind of an extreme version of traveling would be when you guys covered the ODU Bahamas Bowl. With something that's kind of that, I'll say expensive, same process, tell the news director, hey, we want to go and money's no object, or what?
I wouldn't say money's no object, but, you got to make the pitch. You better make a good pitch. And with Old Dominion going to the Bahamas, that was their first ever bowl game. It wasn't that. I don't think it was that expensive. And then, then you get sales involved, and maybe sales can maybe sell some packages around that to kind of help offset the costs. But, the Bahamas Bowl, and I went to the Myrtle Beach Bowl with Craig Loper when Old Dominion played Tulsa in December. That was a ton of fun. We were there for about 5 days. It was a lot of running around work. But, you're covering Old Dominion in a bowl game, and the whole week in Myrtle Beach's weather was amazing until the day of the game when it was like 30 degrees.
Oh, geez.
A lot of fun. And, that was another easy green light. We go to our new news director, Sarah, and, tell her why we think we should be there and what we can provide. And we got the green light, and all 3 stations went. So it would have looked bad if we didn't.
What are some of the biggest, most memorable things that you've covered in sports?
Numero uno, it was 2001, Daytona 500. It was me, Jeff Myers, and Bruce Rader were there. Last lap, Jeff Myers and I are on this tower, an infield tower, but you can see the entire track. And we're watching it, and it's Michael Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Dale Earnhardt. 1, 2, 3. And the weird thing with NASCAR, Dale Earnhardt raced for a team called Richard Childress Racing. But he had a side hustle, basically, where he owned his own team, that he had drivers racing for him. And those drivers were Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Michael Waltrip, his son and Michael Waltrip, competing teams. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird deal that NASCAR does that. So Dale Earnhardt, in front of him are the 2 drivers that he owns. He owns those cars. Flock of guys behind Dale Earnhardt in the 3 car, and he's almost trying to block the other cars from passing him. We're thinking, well, he's going to want one of his teammates, one of his team members to win that he owns. And then Michael Waltrip was in the front, and then on the last turn of the last lap, Earnhardt goes into the wall. And what it looked like to me, I remember elbowing Jeff Myers going, Sterling Marlin wrecked Dale Earnhardt. That's what it looked like. That's not what happened. It's a big track, 2.5 miles. Imagine it's hard to see everything. So the attention immediately focused to, holy crap, Michael Waltrip's going to win the Daytona 500. This is a guy that had never won a race of an official cup points race, like 700 starts, never won a race. And the Earnhardt wreck didn't look that bad. The attention is immediately focused to who won the race. So, at that point, we go to Victory Lane because we want to get interviews and things like that. Michael Waltrip pulls in. I remember getting almost emotional because Michael Waltrip was so happy that he won. And he's got such an infectious personality. I was like, man, I'm so happy for this guy because we had interviewed him during the week, and he's such a cool guy. And then we go back to the truck, and Bruce is inside the truck, and he's kind of working on the story. And I walk outside, and I hear somebody say, I heard the Earnhardt wreck. I heard it was pretty serious. Then I heard another person say, I heard he was DOA. I'm like, what? Okay. So I go into the truck. I'm like, hey, Bruce, I mean, somebody out there saying Earnhardt died in that wreck. I mean, I don't think he's like, okay, well, we need to be on the kind of lookout on this. And then word just kind of started, again, 2001, internet not like it is today. Words kind of just filtering around the garage that, hey, there's going to be a press conference. There's going to be a press conference. There's going to be a press conference at 7 o'clock, press conference. We're like, again, no official word. This is all like word of mouth. 7 o'clock behind these gates, there's like 200 media members, and they finally let us into this little room. And at this point, the buzz is out. I think Earnhardt died, but you can't report on something like that because you heard somebody say that. You need official confirmation. So we go into the room, and I remember looking over the shoulder of an Associated Press writer. He had his story, his first paragraph written. He's just ready to hit send once the confirmation comes in. And I'm looking at it, and I read the first paragraph, and it said, 7-time Winston Cup champion Dale Earnhardt died on the last lap of the Daytona 500. And I'm like, whoa, man, just to see it in writing, you kind of knew, but to see it in writing, that's like, holy cow. And then Mike Helton, the president, comes up and basically just says, hey, on the last turn of the last lap, the Daytona 500, we lost Dale Earnhardt. And once that confirmation, then it's just, Bruce was doing live shots for us, obviously. But since we're down there, he's doing live shots for NBC stations in the Central Time Zone. And then he does live shots for NBC stations in the Pacific Time Zone. Then he's got to wake up and do it all over again in the morning. Started at like 5 in the morning to report on this. We were supposed to leave the next day. We had to stay an extra couple of days because obviously that's the story where, there's more press conferences and there's more reaction to get. So the death of Dale Earnhardt, hands down the biggest event I've ever been a part of. And it was cool to see Bruce in action on something big like that. I mean, that was, that was a national story. That was the national story of the week. And to be there. And before the race, it was, the Daytona 500, we would be there for 7 days. And there's all these events leading up to the Daytona 500. Ironically, one of the big topics of the week was safety. The safety of the cars, the safety of this package that they have where these cars are so tight. And that was a big topic, safety. Ironically, somebody died. And then there's all these different events. And there was one event where it was an IROC race, and it was where there are these different types of cars, and it's Dale Earnhardt and Eddie Cheever got into it. And after the race, I've got a camera and a microphone, and I'm walking backwards and interviewing Earnhardt and asking him a question, and he answers it. And, I wasn't a big Earnhardt fan, but that week I remember thinking, man, I kind of like this guy. And before the race, we're on pit road, me and Jeff Myers. I was like, hey, Jeff, let me get my picture for an Earnhardt's car. I think he's my new favorite driver. And it's like, literally, in the picture, there's a guy shooing me away because they're like, the drivers are starting to come in. So I have a picture of me in front of Dale Earnhardt's screen with a thumbs up the day of the race that he died at. Possibly one of the last people to get their pictures taken in front of his car.
Wow. I mean, that is probably one of, if not, like I said, I don't know much about sports, but I would say that's one of the biggest moments in sports history ever.
Yeah. The most popular driver in NASCAR dies and it's almost a Shakespearean tragedy with Earnhardt because he was, there's all these different races at Daytona. The Daytona 500 is not it. There's these preliminary races. There's these qualifying races. And if you stack all those up, Earnhardt was the winningest driver at Daytona, except for the Daytona 500. He was snake bitten. There was one year he had it won. He was going to win. He had a 5-car lead. Last lap, he drives over a lug nut, blows his tire. Some guy named Derek Cope ends up winning. Another time, it's there towards the end, and it looks like he's going to win. He gets in a terrible crash where he barrel rolls, and the car lands on its two, and he gets it taped up, and he brings it back on the track just to finish the race. He was so snake bit at Daytona. And then in 1998, he finally won the Daytona 500. And then 3 years later, it's just the fact that all of these things happened at Daytona for him, and then for it to end the way it did. I mean, it's a Shakespearean play. Wow.
You mentioned safety in NASCAR, and in recent years we've seen, I don't remember the guy's name, but one of the gnarlier crashes in history probably too. But the guy was fine, and he's still racing, right?
Was that the Ryan Newman crash a few years ago?
Yeah, that's the name.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he was fine. He was, he spent a couple of days in the hospital. He walked out, but looked like he was hurting. Yes, he is still. He has raced since then. Yeah. That was the safety's come a long way. Earnhardt didn't wear a Hans device. I don't know if you know what a Hans device is, but it's basically head and neck restraint. Yeah. And it was optional back then, and he didn't wear one. His helmet. Have you seen what Earnhardt's helmet used to look like? It was open face with goggles. He didn't have anything protecting him. He was old school as they come. And, he wasn't going to wear a Hans device. And there were guys even after Earnhardt died that they didn't want to wear. But then I think, NASCAR mandated it. But that was a tricky time in NASCAR. In 2000, Kenny Irwin and Adam Petty both died in practice sessions in New Hampshire. And there was another guy, that Blaze Alexander, died in a lower circuit. So, that 2002, then leading up to Earnhardt, which there hasn't been a death in NASCAR, I don't believe, since. They had some figuring out to do as far as safety goes, and apparently they figured it out because to not have a death since. But it's a dangerous sport.
For sure. I mean, when you're going 200 miles an hour, expected to be dangerous.
In the Earnhardt crash, people say it doesn't look that bad, and it didn't, but you have to keep in perspective. He basically went from 190 miles an hour to zero. And back then, they didn't have the soft walls, no padded walls. That was an innovation that came after that. And so, when it's all relative, when all the cars are going 200 miles an hour, and then you see him do the direct hit and the stop, it didn't seem as bad as the barrel roll. But the barrel roll, you're probably safer because you're not, you're just kind of in the air. Hopefully you land right. And, but when you go head on into the wall, those are the worst ones. Because he just snapped his neck.
All right. Well, not to totally change gears, but take me through, I don't want to make you late for work, but take me through a typical day in the life of a sports producer, sometimes anchor when other people are out.
Well, you just kind of come in, you kind of see what's going on. You got to, excuse me, you got to know what's going on. You got to know what games are going to be played that night. You kind of go in and you do the 6 o'clock segment. It's about 3 minutes. And, we'll try to find the best local stuff that we can for that day. A lot of times it'll be a feature package to feature somebody in the community. And oftentimes after the 6th, I'm out shooting games, be it a high school basketball, high school football, college basketball, college football, high school basketball, anything like that. Bring that back. Got to keep an eye out what's going on. Like UVA may be playing. We have to roll on the UVA Duke game or whatever that is. And then we have from 10:45 to 11, we have the FOX43 Sportswrap, which, 15-minute local sports show. Very unique, very privileged to have that. Because like I said, with talking about the huddle, 30 minutes. Whatever time they give you, it's never enough. If they give you 10, you want 15. If they give you 15, you want 20. You always want more time. So it's nice to have that extra time for the FOX43 Sportswrap. maybe go a little more in depth on some things, maybe let the sound bites breathe a little more, and maybe go a little longer on a feature story, get an extra game in here and there. And then after that, then we got to kind of condense everything and get ready for the 11 o'clock segment, which is about 3 minutes. Then, of course, we have our WAVY.com obligations. We have to populate the web. It's another big thing that we didn't have to deal with when I first started, having stories on the web. But that's another great way for our stories to get out there. And with social media and Twitter and a Wavy's Facebook page and just getting the stories out there so more people can see them, more people can see our work. That's what you want to see. You want people to see your work.
One last question for you. What does the future of the sports wrap in the sports department at Wavy look like? I know Bruce, as you mentioned, has been there 45 years. You've been there 20 plus. We've just brought on Craig Loper. Nathan's young and hungry. What's on you guys' agenda?
Well, just, keep the train moving. Bruce isn't going to be here forever. Let's be honest, 45 years, he's got 2 sets of twins. One set are in high school at Cox, and the other set are 3 years old. So, Bruce has already scaled back a lot. He doesn't do he only does the 6 o'clock sports now. He doesn't do the late shows. That's Craig Loper. So Craig Loper will be assuming the sports director role, and he'll be the face of the franchise, moving forward, when Bruce hangs up the cleats for good. And I'm excited about the future. Craig and I have developed a great working relationship. We went down to the bowl game, instant chemistry right out of the gates, which I was so happy for. And I love my role. I get the best of both worlds. I love being behind the scenes. I don't want to be the guy every day, but I do like to get on every once in a while, So it's kind of like I get to do the on-air thing here and there, and then the behind the scenes, to kind of put everything together. I like that dynamic a lot. And Saturdays in the fall, I'll come in and work, the college football games, and the schedule's always in flux. It's never set in stone when you're covering sports, because there could be the 9 a.m. press conference, which I don't know why they would do that to us, because they know we all work nights when people do that. But you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes there's 12-hour days, 14-hour days, and just kind of keep on doing what we're doing. And I think having Craig's going to be a tremendous asset for us moving forward. And I can't wait to see what happens. And Nathan, killing it with his local stories as always. Just keeps getting better and better. Talk about him being a young gun. He's almost been here 10 years now. That's crazy. He interned with us back there in sports. So Nathan's a veteran now.
Yeah, he does a great job. You guys all do a great job.
We try, man. We try. Just keep busy. There's always something. Next.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Just if I could get one fine from you.
It's fine.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks for joining for season 2 of Dumbest in the Room. I just want to remind you that we're on all listening platforms. I also want to remind you that we're on social media at DumbestITR, on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook at Dumbest in the Room. I'd appreciate a follow and a like. Thanks so much.